When my son Jackson discovered I had secretly accumulated $3 million over my lifetime, his first words weren't of pride or gratitude. They were about getting me to sign papers to transfer power of attorney to him. 3 days later, I found myself sitting in a nursing home room while they listed my house for sale. That's when I realized the inheritance I'd planned for my children would instead fund a new life that would shock them all. I still remember the antiseptic smell of that place, Willow Creek Care Center, the pungent mixture of industrial cleaning products and medical supplies that never quite masked the underlying scent of decay. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My room was small, but efficient, as the brochure had described it. A single bed with side rails, a nightstand bolted to the floor, and a window overlooking the parking lot. This was to be my new home, according to my children. "It's for your own good, Mom," Robin had insisted that morning as they helped me settle in. Her voice carried that peculiar tone people use when speaking to someone they no longer see as capable, overly bright, deliberately slow, as if addressing a child. "After that fall last month, we just can't risk you being alone anymore." I watched her arranging my toiletries in the tiny bathroom, meticulously placing my toothbrush and denture cream like artifacts in a museum display. My son Jackson stood by the door, his attention divided between the conversation and something on his phone, thumbs tapping away at the screen. "The house is just too much to maintain at your age," he added without looking up. "Once we sell it, we'll have plenty to cover your care here. The realtor thinks we can get at least $850,000 in this market. My house, the home where I'd lived for 43 years. The place where I'd raised them, where their father had taken his last breath. Now reduced to a dollar amount, a resource to be liquidated. And what about my say in all this?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. Robin exchanged a quick glance with her brother. "Mom, we've been over this. You agreed, remember? The doctor said your memory might be a bit spotty after the fall." I hadn't agreed to anything. My fall had been minor, a slip on a rug that resulted in nothing more than a bruised hip and wounded pride. But it had given them the opening they'd been looking for. "We're just doing what Dad would have wanted," Jackson added, finally pocketing his phone. "Making sure you're safe." Their father would have been appalled, but I didn't say that. Instead, I watched as they continued transforming this sterile room into what they thought would pass for a home. Robin hung a few family photos on the wall, carefully selected ones, where they looked particularly caring, particularly devoted. Jackson set up a small television on the dresser, explaining the simplified remote control as if operating it would be the intellectual summit of my remaining days. What they didn't know, what I had never told them, was about the money. For nearly 5 decades, I had been quietly investing. It started small, just $25 a month from my teaching salary, back when their father and I were first married. As the years passed, I increased the amounts, diversified into different funds, and watched it grow. Through recessions and market surges, I maintained those accounts with a discipline few knew I possessed. Not even my late husband had fully understood the extent of my financial acumen. The total now stood at just over $3 million. I had planned to surprise them with it eventually. A substantial inheritance to help Robin start the business she'd always talked about but never pursued. Funds for Jackson to finally pay off the mortgage that had been weighing on him since his divorce. Money for my grandchildren's education. I had it all mapped out. My final gift to them. But sitting there, watching them dismantle my independence piece by piece, I felt something shift inside me. A lifetime of accommodating, of putting their needs before mine, suddenly seemed like a terrible mistake. Had I raised them to see me only as a responsibility, an inconvenience to be managed? Had my decades of self-sacrifice taught them that I existed solely in relation to their needs? "We've set up automatic payments from your account for the monthly fees here," Jackson was saying, his voice dropping to what he probably thought was out of my hearing range. The retirement checks should cover most of it, and we can use some of the house money to create a fund for the rest. Robin nodded, glancing at me with that same patronizing smile. You won't have to worry about a thing, Mom. We'll handle everything. That's when I saw it clearly. They had already divided my life into assets and liabilities. The house, my pension, my belongings, all neatly categorized as resources to be allocated according to their convenience. And me? I had become nothing more than an obligation, a problem to solve. I think I'd like to rest now, I said quietly, forcing my lips into a polite smile. It's been a long day. They seemed relieved to be dismissed. Robin kissed my cheek, promised to visit on Sunday. Jackson gave my shoulder an awkward pat, and then they were gone, the door clicking shut behind them with a strange finality. In the sudden silence of that room, sitting on the edge of a bed that wasn't mine, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Rage. Pure, clarifying anger that burned away decades of maternal accommodation. I wasn't confused, I wasn't having memory problems, and I certainly wasn't ready to be shelved away while they dismantled the life I'd built. I stood up and walked to the IEI window, watching as they crossed the parking lot to their cars. Robin was already on her phone, probably calling Avery, her husband, to report that Mother had been successfully transitioned. Jackson was laughing at something, his step noticeably lighter now that the unpleasant task was complete. That's when I knew. The $3 million wouldn't be their inheritance after all. It would be my liberation. I waited until their cars disappeared from view before reaching for my purse, my fingers finding the small notebook where I kept account numbers, passwords, contact information for my financial advisor, resources they knew nothing about, power they hadn't accounted for. This isn't over, I whispered to the empty room. Not by a long shot. I should have seen it coming. The signs were there, accumulating like dust in forgotten corners of our relationship. Perhaps I had been willfully blind, clinging to the image of my children as the loving, grateful people I had raised them to be. It started after Wallace, my husband of 47 years, passed away. The first crack appeared during the reading of his will, a modest document that left everything to me, as we had always planned. I would manage our resources during my lifetime, and upon my death, everything would pass to our children. Simple, traditional, fair. But I caught the look that passed between Robin and Jackson that day. A fleeting exchange of disappointment, quickly masked. Later, Jackson had approached me in the kitchen during the post-funeral gathering at our home. "Mom, Dad didn't leave much of a cushion, did he?" he'd said, studying the granite countertop rather than meeting my eyes. "I mean, the house is great, but liquid assets." "We managed our money carefully," I'd replied, deliberately vague. Wallace and I had agreed long ago to keep our investment portfolio private, not secretive exactly, just separate from our family discussions. "Money changes people," he always said, "even the ones you trust most." "I'm just concerned about you, that's all," Jackson continued. "On a fixed income now, the property taxes alone on this place must be crushing." That was the first suggestion that perhaps the house was too much for me. It wouldn't be the last. Robin was subtler, but no less persistent. She began dropping by unannounced, ostensibly to check on me, but her eyes would scan the house critically. "Mom, that step is loose again," she'd note. Or, "The gutters really need cleaning, you know." Each observation delivered with the same conclusion. This place is becoming a lot to handle, isn't it? Then came the doctor's appointments. Suddenly, one or both of them insisted on accompanying me to routine checkups. They would speak before I could, answering questions directed at me. "She's been a bit forgetful lately," Robin told my doctor during a visit for a routine blood pressure check. Her voice lowered as if I couldn't hear her from 2 feet away. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I forgot one dinner invitation, I corrected, because I was attending my book club, the same one I've attended on the first Thursday of every month for 12 years. The doctor had smiled neutrally, caught between us, but something shifted that day. My children had positioned themselves as authorities on my condition, and they were building a case. Donnie, Robin's oldest son and my first grandchild, was the only one who seemed to notice what was happening. During a Sunday dinner at Robin's house, he'd found me alone in the kitchen and asked point blank, "Grandma, are you okay with how Mom and Uncle Jackson are treating you?" Before I could answer, Robin had swept in, cutting off our conversation with forced cheerfulness and a meaningful look at her son. Later, I overheard them arguing in hushed tones on the back porch. "She's my grandmother, and you're talking about her like she's a problem to solve," Donnie had said, his voice tight with anger. "You don't understand the responsibility involved," Robin had replied. "When you're the one managing an elderly parent, then you can judge." Elderly. The word had struck me like a physical blow. Is that what I had become to them? A category rather than a person? Yet I said nothing. Did nothing. Decades of putting peace above confrontation had conditioned me to smooth troubled waters rather than make waves. I told myself they were concerned, not controlling, caring, not calculating. Even when they began helping with my finances, I acquiesced. Jackson offered to set up automatic payments for my bills. "So you don't have to worry about forgetting," he'd explained. Robin suggested consolidating my accounts for simplicity's sake. I agreed to the bill payments but held firm on maintaining my separate accounts. What they didn't know was that the accounts they saw, my checking, a small savings fund, and a modest IRA, represented only a fraction of my financial picture. The bulk of my assets remained invisible to them, managed through a financial advisor I'd worked with for decades, a woman who understood my desire for privacy. Candace Winters had been handling my investments since before Robin and Jackson were in high school. She knew about the rental properties I'd quietly acquired in the 1980s and sold at substantial profit in the early 2000s. She managed the diversified portfolio we'd built together: blue-chip stocks, municipal bonds, a carefully selected range of mutual funds. Over decades, these investments had grown steadily, compounding into a sum that would have astonished my children. "You really should tell them," Candace had suggested during our last meeting before Wallace's death. "Financial transparency can prevent family conflicts down the road." Wallace had squeezed my hand then. "Margaret knows our children better than anyone," he'd told Candace. "If she thinks this information is better shared later, I trust her judgment." I had planned to tell them eventually, perhaps on my 75th birthday, still 2 years away. I imagined their surprise, their gratitude at discovering their fiscally conservative mother had secretly secured their financial futures. I pictured the relief on Jackson's face, the tears in Robin's eyes. In my mind, the revelation would transform our relationship, deepening their respect for me. But the past year had revealed an uncomfortable truth. My children saw my aging not as a new phase of my life, but as a diminishment of my personhood. Each small physical setback, a bout of pneumonia last winter, the minor fall in my garden, became evidence in their minds that I was no longer capable of independence. The final straw came when I discovered Robin had contacted a lawyer about guardianship options. She'd left the email open on her tablet during a visit, never imagining I would notice or understand its implications. The message outlined the legal requirements for demonstrating an elderly parent's diminished capacity and the steps needed to establish legal control over their affairs. I read those clinical, detached words and felt something fundamental break inside me. The children I had raised, nurtured, and sacrificed for were plotting to legally strip me of my autonomy, not because I needed protection, but because it was convenient for them. A week later, I had the fall. A simple accident. My slipper caught on the edge of the kitchen rug. That resulted in nothing more than bruised dignity and a sore hip. But it gave them the opening they'd been waiting for. 3 days later, I was installed at Willow Creek, my independence packaged neatly away like the belongings they'd selected to accompany me. A sanitized subset of my life, chosen for practicality, rather than meaning. What they couldn't know was that their actions had made my decision for me. The money I had saved for them would now serve a different purpose altogether. After a lifetime of putting others first, I was about to put myself first for a change, and it would begin with a phone call to Candace. I was not always so accommodating. There was a time, before children, before the comfortable routines of marriage, had softened my edges, when I was known for my independence. My late husband often joked that he fell in love with me precisely because I refused to fall for him. We met at the university library in 1967. I was studying economics and mathematics, in an era when women were still expected to pursue more suitable subjects like education or nursing. Wallace was a history major with a poet's soul and an argumentative nature. Our first conversation was a debate about fiscal policy that ended with me telling him, quite firmly, that his understanding of economic principles was both romantic and impractical. Instead of being offended, he asked me to coffee. I declined. He persisted for weeks, leaving notes in my textbooks, appearing at campus events he knew I would attend. Finally, I agreed to one coffee, purely to explain to him, face to face, why his pursuit was futile. 3 hours later, we were still talking. Not about romance, but about ideas, ambitions, the world we wanted to build. He respected my mind in a way few men of that era did, and I admired his stubborn idealism, so different from my practical nature. "You know what I like about you, Margaret," he said that day. "You don't need me. If we build something together, it will be because you choose it, not because you're looking for someone to complete you." We married 2 years later, equal partners, with separate strengths. Wallace taught history at the high school level, passionate about opening young minds to the lessons of the past. I worked in banking, steady and meticulous, building our financial foundation brick by careful brick. When Robin was born in 1972, followed by Jackson in 1974, we agreed I would step back from full-time work until they started school. But I never stopped managing our finances, setting aside what I could, planning for the future with the same precision I had applied in my professional life. Wallace trusted me completely with our money. "You have the head for numbers," he'd say. "I'd rather focus on the past than plan for the future." It became our division of labor. He handled the daily household, coached the children's soccer teams, led the neighborhood association, while I quietly ensured our financial security grew steadily behind the scenes. By the time the children were in high school, I had returned to work, accepting a position at a local credit union. The salary was modest, but it allowed me to contribute to my employer-matched retirement fund while still managing our household. Few people, looking at our comfortable but modest lifestyle, would have guessed at the growing nest egg I was accumulating through careful investing. "Mom's cheap," Robin would complain to her friends when I refused to buy the designer jeans that everyone was wearing. "She works at a bank but acts like we're poor." I never corrected her, never explained that the difference between those jeans and the perfectly serviceable ones I purchased was being invested in her future. That each small economy, the vacations at state parks instead of resorts, the secondhand books, the home-cooked meals instead of restaurants, was part of a larger strategy. Wallace understood, though we rarely discussed it explicitly. On our 30th anniversary, he gave me a small wooden box he had crafted himself. "For your secret millions," he teased, his eyes crinkling with affection. "One day the kids will realize their frugal mother was a financial wizard all along." Inside, the box was a note. To Margaret, who taught me that love isn't just about grand gestures, but about planning for a future together. "Thank you for your quiet strength." I kept that box on my nightstand long after Wallace was gone. Robin and Jackson never asked about it, never noticed the tears in my eyes when I would touch its smooth wooden surface. They had grown into adults, who saw only what they expected to see in their conventional, predictable mother. After Wallace's death 5 years ago, I continued living as we always had, carefully, modestly, the opposite of extravagant. My one indulgence was my garden, the English cottage-style flowers that filled the front yard, the vegetable beds that produced far more than I could eat alone, the herb garden that scented the air on warm summer evenings. It was in the garden that I felt closest to myself, to the woman I had been before becoming mom, and then Widow Harris. With my hands in the soil, I was simply Margaret again, capable, creative, connected to something essential and true. Perhaps that's why they targeted the garden first. "Mom, you really shouldn't be bending and stooping so much at your age," Robin began saying last spring. "What if you fall out there and no one finds you for hours?" "The landscaping service I use could take this over," Jackson suggested. "It's not that expensive, and then you wouldn't have to worry about maintaining it." Maintaining it. As if my garden was a burden rather than a joy. As if the hours I spent nurturing plants were a chore I needed rescuing from rather than the meditative practice that kept me grounded. I resisted, of course. Gently at first, then more firmly as their suggestions became insistence. "The garden stays as it is," I finally said during a particularly tense Sunday dinner at Robin's house. "I'm perfectly capable of managing it, and I have no intention of stopping." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken judgment. Later, I overheard Robin on the phone with her husband. "She's becoming more stubborn," she said, her voice low. "Mom used to be so reasonable, but lately it's like she's digging her heels in about everything." What Robin couldn't understand, what neither of my children seemed able to grasp, was that my so-called stubbornness was simply self-preservation. Each concession they asked of me, each reasonable suggestion, chipped away at my independence, my identity, my connection to the life I had built. Wallace had seen it coming. In his final months, as cancer slowly claimed him, he had warned me. "They'll try to take care of you," he said one night, his voice thin but his eyes sharp and clear. "They'll think they're doing what's best, but Margaret, don't let them decide what's best for you. You've always known your own mind. Don't surrender that, not even to our children." I had promised him I wouldn't, a promise that grew increasingly difficult to keep as the subtle campaign to manage me intensified after his death. The irony was that through all this, I was still quietly managing millions. Each quarter, I met with Candace to review my portfolio, make adjustments, reinvest dividends. The balance continued to grow, reaching a sum that would have astonished my children had they known. $3,217,000 and change, Candace announced at our last meeting, just 2 weeks before my fall. "You've outperformed the market again, Margaret. Your conservative approach during the downturn really paid off." I had nodded, satisfied but not surprised. Money had always made sense to me in a way people sometimes didn't. Numbers don't have emotions or agendas. They simply are what they are, responding predictably to careful stewardship. If only relationships were so straightforward. "Have you decided when you'll tell your children?" Candace asked, as she always did. "Soon," I replied, as I always did. But, sitting in that nursing home room, with the door closed on my forcibly downsized life, I realized soon had arrived, though not in the way I had imagined. It was time for Robin and Jackson to learn about the money. Not as an inheritance, but as the means of my escape. The nursing home schedule was regimented with military precision. Breakfast at 7:30 a.m. sharp, medication at 8:15. Group activities, a euphemism for seated exercises and simplistic crafts, at 9 wine. Lunch at noon. Afternoon television in the common room at 2 am. Dinner at 5:30, early enough to process medications and prepare residents for bed by 8 p.m. They called it structured living. I called it infantilization. I had been at Willow Creek for exactly 4 days when I decided to break the routine. Nothing dramatic. I wasn't planning a prison break, at least not yet. But I needed to assert some small control, to remind myself that I was still capable of independent action. The opportunity came during afternoon recreation time. Renee, a cheerful aide with bright purple fingernails and a tendency to speak too loudly, was leading a bingo game in the common room. Most residents dutifully attended, grateful for any distraction from the monotony. I had begged off, claiming a headache. "I'll check on you in an hour, Mrs. Harris," Renee promised, patting my hand. "You just rest up." Once alone, I changed from the loose-fitting slacks and blouse Robin had selected for my comfort into one of the few outfits I had managed to save from her purge of my closet, a tailored navy dress with a jacket that Wallace had always admired. I applied lipstick, added pearl earrings, and slipped on proper shoes instead of the rubber-soled walking shoes my children insisted were safer. The nurse's station was minimally staffed during activity time. A single attendant, focused on paperwork, barely glanced up as I walked confidently past, my posture straight, my pace purposeful. The key was to look like you belonged wherever you were going, like you had permission. The facility had a small courtyard garden, a few concrete benches, surrounding an uninspired arrangement of low-maintenance shrubs and seasonal flowers. It was accessible without an alarm, unlike the main entrance, though residents were encouraged to have staff accompaniment when using it. The garden was deserted when I arrived, everyone else occupied with bingo or resting in their rooms. I sat on a bench in a patch of late afternoon sunlight, closed my eyes, and took my first deep breath in days. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and the cypress trees that lined the property's perimeter. "Making a break for it?" a voice asked, amused rather than accusatory. I opened my eyes to find an elderly man standing nearby, impeccably dressed in pressed khakis and a button-down shirt, leaning lightly on a polished wooden cane. His white hair was neatly combed, his posture military straight despite the cane. "Just escaping bingo," I replied. "If I have to hear B9 one more time, I might actually lose my mind, which would finally justify my being here." He laughed, a rich, genuine sound, and gestured to the space beside me. "May I?" I nodded, and he settled onto the bench with the careful movements of someone managing chronic pain with dignity. "Daniel Blackwood," he introduced himself, offering his hand. "Recent, involuntary resident, courtesy of my well-meaning daughter, and pragmatic son-in-law. Margaret Harris," I replied, shaking his hand. "Similar circumstances, different children?" "Ah, the classic, it's for your own good scenario." He nodded sagely. "What was your final offense?" "Mine was leaving the stove on overnight. One time in 82 years. I slipped on a rug," I admitted. "Didn't even need a Band-Aid, but it was apparently the last straw." Daniel shook his head, a mixture of understanding and indignation in his expression. "They wait for these moments, don't they? Store them up like ammunition." For the next hour, we sat in that lackluster garden and traded stories. Daniel had been a professor of literature at the State University for 40 years. A widower for the past decade, he had lived independently until his daughter Candace, not your financial advisor, he clarified, decided his occasional forgetfulness, and the aforementioned stove incident warranted intervention. "The irony is that I'm still teaching," he told me. "I lead an online seminar for continuing education students every Wednesday. From my room here, on a laptop they don't know I have. My daughter thinks I'm watching matinee movies those afternoons." His small rebellion delighted me. "How long have you been here?" I asked. 6 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days, he answered promptly. "But who's counting?" The precision of his response, delivered with a self-deprecating smile, made me laugh. It was the first genuine laugh I'd experienced since being transitioned to Willow Creek. You don't plan to stay, he observed. It wasn't a question. I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal to this stranger, no matter how kindred his spirit seemed. I'm considering my options, I finally said. Daniel nodded, understanding the caution behind my words. Well, when you've moved beyond considering, I hope you'll remember your afternoon companion. Some of us still have adventures left in us, Margaret. Before I could respond, Renee's voice called across the garden. Mrs. Harris, there you are. We've been looking everywhere. She hurried toward us, concern and mild annoyance competing in her expression. You shouldn't be out here alone. What if you had fallen? What if you needed help? Daniel winked at me as Renee fussed, checking me over as if my unauthorized garden visit might have resulted in injury. Mrs. Harris was not alone, he told Renee calmly. She was kind enough to keep an old professor company on this lovely afternoon. Renee seemed temporarily disarmed by his formal, authoritative tone, but quickly recovered. Well, it's time for your medication, Mrs. Harris, and Dr. Lowell is stopping by for your evaluation in 30 minutes. Ah, yes, the evaluation. My children had arranged for the facility's doctor to assess my cognitive status and care needs. The results, I suspected, were predetermined. I should go, I said to Daniel, rising from the bench. Thank you for the company. The pleasure was mine, he replied with old-world courtesy. Same time tomorrow, perhaps? Weather permitting? It was a small thing, an hour in a mediocre garden with a stranger who understood my situation, trivial in the grand scheme. Yet as I followed Renee back inside, I felt different, steadier, more like myself. That evening, after enduring Dr. Lowell's patronizing assessment and picking at the bland dinner served precisely at 5:30, I sat at the small desk in my room and made a list, not of grievances or complaints, but of assets, resources, strengths. I wrote down account numbers, contact information, passwords. I noted the name of my attorney, not the family lawyer Robin and Jackson consulted, but a sharp-minded woman I had retained independently years earlier. I listed friends who had no connection to my children, people who knew me as Margaret, rather, than as Robin and Jackson's mother. When the list was complete, I folded it carefully and slipped it into the lining of my purse, where the facility staff and my children would never think to look. Then I took out my personal cell phone, the one Robin thought she had helped me replace with a simplified model with large buttons and pre-programmed numbers, and made my first call. Candace, it's Margaret Harris. I need your help with something rather urgent. Yes, I know it's evening. This can't wait until our regular meeting. Things have changed. As I explained my situation, Candace's initial surprise gave way to professional focus. She asked precise questions, offered clear options, and never once suggested that perhaps my children had my best interests at heart. I can have everything prepared within 3 days, she said finally. Are you certain this is what you want to do? More certain than I've been about anything in years, I replied. When I ended the call, I felt a calm settle over me, the tranquility that comes with action after too long a period of passivity. I had taken the first small step toward reclaiming my life. Not just rebelling against an imposed schedule or sneaking into a garden, but setting in motion a plan that would transform my circumstances entirely. Robin and Jackson had made their choice. Now I would make mine. Dr. Lowell's evaluation concluded precisely as I had anticipated. Mild cognitive impairment, the report stated, with recommendations for supervised living and assistance with financial management. The language was clinical, designed to sound objective, but the conclusions were foregone. I was now officially categorized as diminished, not quite incompetent, but certainly not fully capable. Robin arrived the following afternoon, Dr. Lowell's report already in her possession. She wore what I had come to think of as her managing mother outfit, sensible slacks, a cardigan, and an expression of patient concern masking unassailable authority. "I've brought some paperwork," she announced after the perfunctory kisses and questions about whether I was settling in. She pulled a leather portfolio from her handbag and spread several documents on the small table near the window. "Just a few things to make everything easier," she explained, uncapping a pen. "Power of attorney for financial matters. Jackson and I would be co-signers, of course, medical directives, and some transfer forms for your accounts." I looked at the papers, then at my daughter. Her hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, the same style she'd worn since high school. Behind her designer glasses, her eyes, so like Wallace's, held an expectation of compliance. "And if I don't want to sign these?" I asked quietly. Robin blinked, momentarily surprised by the question, then recovered with a practiced smile. "Mom, we've discussed this. After Dad died, you agreed we'd need to make arrangements eventually, with your recent episodes. And now Dr. Lowell's assessment? It's really the sensible thing to do." I hadn't agreed to anything of the sort. What I had said after Wallace's funeral was that I appreciated their concern, but was perfectly capable of managing my affairs. But memory is malleable, especially when it serves one's purposes to reshape it. "Tell me about the house," I said, instead of arguing the point. "How are the preparations for the sale coming along?" The slight flush that rose in Robin's cheeks confirmed what I already knew. They were moving quickly. "We've had the initial assessment from the realtor," she admitted. "She thinks with minimal updating we could list by the end of the month. The market is strong right now." "And my belongings? My furniture? The things your father and I collected. Over 50 years of marriage?" Robin shifted uncomfortably. "We'll keep the important things, of course. Family photos, keepsakes. The rest." She hesitated. "The rest would probably just complicate the sale. Clean staging sells houses faster." "So my life will be disposed of," I stated flatly. "Cleared away to facilitate a quicker transaction." "Mom, that's not fair. We're trying to ensure your care is provided for." "By selling the home I own outright? By liquidating my possessions? Tell me, Robin, once the house is sold, where will that money go?" "Into a trust," she replied quickly. "For your ongoing care." "Managed by whom?" "Well, Jackson and I, naturally, as your power of attorney." She tapped the document in front of me. "That's why we need to get these signed today. The sooner everything's in order, the sooner we can proceed with the sale." I studied my daughter's face. The daughter I had carried inside me, had nursed at my breast, had taught to read and ride a bicycle and navigate the complexities of adolescent friendships. I searched for the child I had known in the woman before me, and found only a stranger wearing familiar features. "No," I said simply. Robin stared at me, uncomprehending. "No what?" "No, I will not sign these papers. No, you will not sell my house. No, you will not manage my money. No." Her expression shifted from confusion to exasperation. "Mom, be reasonable. You can't live alone anymore. You've proven that. The house needs to be sold to fund your care here." "I don't recall agreeing to stay here permanently," I replied, keeping my voice level despite the anger building inside me. "This was presented to me as a temporary arrangement after my fall." Robin sighed heavily, the sound of a patient person dealing with an unreasonable child. "You need full-time supervision now. Dr. Lowell's report makes that clear. If you'd just look at what he wrote—" "I've seen the report," I interrupted. Interestingly, Dr. Lowell spent exactly 12 minutes evaluating me. He asked me what day it was, who the president is, and whether I could count backward from 100 by sevens. He never inquired about my daily activities before coming here, my financial management skills, or my decision-making processes. Yet somehow he concluded I'm incapable of independent living. He's a professional, Mom. He knows what to look for. He saw what he was expected to see, I countered. What you and Jackson have been constructing for months, The narrative of your declining mother who needs rescuing from herself. Robin's professional composure cracked slightly. That's ridiculous. We're trying to protect you. From what, exactly? From living in my own home? From managing my own money? From making my own decisions? From ending up broke and alone? Robin's voice rose in frustration. Do you have any idea how expensive elder care is? What if you need skilled nursing later? What if there's an emergency? Your savings and pension won't cover a fraction of potential costs. I almost laughed at the irony. My daughter was lecturing me about financial planning. Me, who had built a multi-million-dollar portfolio while raising 2 children on a middle-class income. My financial situation is not your concern, I said firmly. It absolutely is my concern. Robin stood up, her patience finally exhausted. You're being selfish and short-sighted. Jackson and I are trying to prevent a crisis, and you're fighting us every step of the way. Selfish, I repeated, the word landing like a slap. I have spent my entire adult life putting you and your brother first. Every decision, every sacrifice, every consideration was for your benefit. And now, when I insist on basic autonomy in my remaining years, I'm selfish? Robin's eyes filled with tears. Whether from frustration or genuine emotion, I couldn't tell. You're not thinking clearly, Mom. This isn't like you. No, Robin. This is exactly like me. The me you never bothered to know. I gathered the unsigned papers and handed them back to her. I won't be signing these today or any day, and I expect you to halt any proceedings related to selling my house immediately. Or what? She challenged, anger replacing tears. You can't stop us from doing what needs to be done. The doctor's report gives us grounds for legal intervention if necessary. The threat hung in the air between us, a line crossed that could never be uncrossed. My own daughter was threatening to have me declared incompetent if I didn't comply with her plans for my life, my home, my resources. I think you should leave now, I said quietly, fighting to keep my voice steady. Mom, please go, Robin. We both need time to think. She stared at me for a long moment, then shoved the papers back into her portfolio with sharp, angry movements. Jackson will be very disappointed, she said, as she stood to leave. A final attempt at manipulation. I've lived with disappointment, I replied. I suspect I'll survive his as well. After she left, I sat motionless in the chair by the window, watching the parking lot until I saw her car pull away. Only then did I allow the tears to come, not the helpless tears of defeat, but the bitter, cleansing tears of rage and resolution. That evening, I made my second call from the hidden cell. Fun. Daniel? It's Margaret from the garden. I believe I'm ready to move beyond considering my options. And yes, I do still have adventures left in me. The following 3 days passed in a strange limbo. After Robin's visit and our confrontation, a peculiar quiet descended. No calls from Jackson. No further visits from Robin. Even the staff at Willow Creek seemed to be giving me a wider berth, their interactions colored with a new wariness. I used the stillness to my advantage. Each day, I met Daniel in the courtyard garden during afternoon activities. Unlike the chaotic emotions swirling inside me, Daniel brought a professor's methodical approach to problem-solving. First, we need to understand what legal standing they actually have, he said during our second meeting, his voice low despite the empty garden. Have they filed for guardianship? Contested your competency in court? Not yet, I replied. But Robin made it clear that's their next step if I don't cooperate. They have Dr. Lowell's assessment, which apparently gives them grounds for legal intervention. Daniel's snort of derision was oddly comforting. A 12-minute evaluation by a facility doctor who probably gets most of his patients from family referrals? Any decent attorney would tear that apart in court. I don't want it to reach court, I admitted. Not just because of the public spectacle, but because by then, it might be too late to stop them from selling the house. He nodded thoughtfully, tapping his cane against the concrete. Then we need to act preemptively. remove their leverage before they can use it. During our third meeting, I shared the outline of my plan. Daniel listened intently, his academics, mind identifying potential pitfalls and suggesting refinements. The timing will be crucial, he cautioned. Once you set this in motion, you'll need to move quickly before they can respond. I know, I said. That's why I'm waiting for confirmation from Candace. Everything needs to be in place before I make my move. On the fourth day after Robin's visit, Candace called me on the hidden cell phone during the facility's mandatory rest period. Everything's arranged, she said without preamble. The funds have been transferred to the new accounts. The paperwork is ready for your signature. Are you certain about the amounts? Absolutely certain, I confirmed. And the remainder? Structured exactly as you requested. The foundation paperwork is prepared. It can be finalized as soon as you're able to meet with the attorney. And my request regarding Donnie? A separate trust has been established. He won't have access until he's 30 as you specified, but a small yearly stipend will be available to him immediately upon activation. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Thank you, Candace, for everything. Just doing my job, Margaret, she replied, though her tone conveyed more personal investment than professional detachment. The car will be at the location you specified tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. The driver will have the paperwork for your immediate signature. After ending the call, I lay on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, I would set in motion changes that could never be reversed. I would be severing ties, burning bridges, closing doors. The finality of it should have terrified me. Instead, I felt only clarity and resolve. That evening, I received my first visitor since Robin's stormy departure. Jackson arrived just after dinner, his normally confident demeanor subdued. He brought a peace offering, a small potted orchid from the gift shop, and an expression of practiced concern. Robin told me about your disagreement, he began after sitting in the room's single visitor chair. She was pretty upset. I imagine she was, I replied neutrally. Jackson sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. Mom, we're not trying to control you. We're trying to protect you and your assets. My assets, I repeated. You and Robin seem very focused on those. His expression flickered with annoyance before settling back into concerned patience. Of course we are. They're what will ensure you're taken care of properly. And who will be doing this proper taking care? The staff here? Or you and Robin with power of attorney over all my finances? That's not fair, he protested. We've never asked for anything for ourselves. The blatant revision of history nearly took my breath away. Jackson, you asked me to co-sign on your mortgage after your divorce. Robin wanted me to finance Avery's business venture last year. You both have been borrowing from my accounts for years. Those were investments in family, he countered defensively. And we always intended to pay you back. Have you? I asked simply. His silence was answer enough. Jackson, I want you to tell me honestly, what's the rush to sell the house? Why the pressure to get power of attorney immediately? He shifted uncomfortably. The market's favorable right now. Interest rates are low. It makes financial sense to move quickly. For whom? Jackson's facade of patient concern cracked slightly. For all of us. Your care isn't cheap, Mom. And it's only going to get more expensive as your needs increase. There it was. The assumption that my decline was inevitable, imminent, and expensive. That I was a financial liability to be managed rather than a person with agency and dignity. I see, I said quietly. And has it occurred to you or Robin that I might have my own plans for my house? My own financial arrangements for my care? Jackson's expression turned patronizing. Mom, with all due respect, you have your pension and some modest savings. That's not enough for long-term care at a quality facility like this. I almost told him then. The words rose to my lips, about the investments, the properties sold, the careful accumulation over decades. About the $3 million they knew nothing about. About how I had planned to divide it between them as their inheritance. But something in his expression, the absolute certainty that he knew better, that he understood finances while his mother was financially naive, stopped me. Why give him information he would only use against me? Why reveal my strongest card before I needed to play it? I've managed my money successfully for over 60 years, I said instead. I believe I can continue to do so. Jackson shook his head, the gesture dismissive despite his attempt at a sympathetic expression. It's different now, Mom. You're not thinking as clearly as you used to. That's not your fault. It's just age and circumstances. I see, I said again, suddenly weary of the conversation. Is there anything else you wanted to discuss? He seemed surprised by my apparent capitulation. Well, I was hoping you might reconsider the power of attorney. It really would make everything simpler. I'll think about it, I lied. Jackson left. Shortly after, visibly relieved that our conversation hadn't escalated like his sister's had. He promised to return in a few days with the paperwork, just in case you change your mind. After he left, I began methodically packing the few personal items I wanted to take with me. The family photos I left, they were duplicates anyway. The nightgowns and slippers Robin had purchased would remain behind. The simplified cell phone would stay on the nightstand. I kept only what mattered. Wallace's wooden box with his note inside. The pearl earrings he had given me on our 40th anniversary. My real cell phone, a single change of clothes. My purse with identification and the carefully hidden list of accounts and contacts. Everything that truly defined me. My home, my garden, my books, my memories, couldn't be packed in a small bag. But they couldn't be taken from me either. Not unless I allowed it. As I prepared for bed that night, following the facility's regimented schedule one last time, I found myself unexpectedly calm. Tomorrow would bring upheaval, confrontation, perhaps even the final severing of family ties. Yet underneath the inevitable sorrow was something stronger, a bone-deep certainty that I was reclaiming not just my financial independence but my fundamental right to self-determination. I slept more soundly that night than I had since arriving at Willow Creek. At precisely 2:15 p.m. the following day, I walked calmly through the courtyard garden toward the service gate at the far end of the property. The afternoon was warm, the sky a clear, limitless blue that seemed like an omen of freedom. Most residents were occupied with the daily movie screening in the common room, a predictable routine that worked to my advantage. Daniel was waiting by a cluster of hydrangea bushes that partially obscured the gate, his familiar cane in one hand and a small leather satchel in the other. Right on schedule, he noted approvingly as I approached. Everything still set? I nodded, feeling strangely light despite the weight of what we were about to do. The car should be outside in 15 minutes. Candace confirmed this morning. Daniel glanced at his watch, a beautiful vintage timepiece that had belonged to his father. Then we have just enough time for me to give you this. He handed me the satchel. Inside was a slim laptop computer, a smartphone newer than my hidden one, and a small envelope. The electronics are untraceable, he explained. Paid for in cash by my grandson, who happens to be sympathetic to our cause. The envelope contains temporary identification, nothing illegal, just membership cards for various organizations under your maiden name. Enough to check into a hotel without raising flags if anyone comes looking. I stared at him, momentarily speechless. Daniel, you didn't have to... Consider it my contribution to the resistance, he said with a wink, though his eyes remained serious. When you told me your plan, I realized I'd been waiting for something similar. Living vicariously through your escape will have to suffice for now. Come with me, I said impulsively. There's no reason both of us can't leave. He smiled, a gentle, wistful expression that carried decades of wisdom. My situation is different from yours, Margaret. I have health conditions that require more care than I'd like to admit. And my Candace, not your Candace, visits daily. She may be overprotective, but her heart is in the right place. Before I could respond, the unmistakable sound of my daughter's voice carried across the garden. "Mom? Are you out here? The front desk said you might be in the garden." Daniel and I exchanged alarmed glances. Robin wasn't supposed to visit today. She had a standing hair appointment on Thursdays. Her unexpected appearance threatened to unravel everything. "Go," Daniel whispered urgently. "I'll intercept her. Buy you some time." "But—" "The service gate code is 5283, he continued, already moving away from me. "Go now, while she's still near the main entrance." With a final grateful nod to my unexpected ally, I hurried toward the gate, moving as quickly as I dared without drawing attention. Behind me, I could hear Daniel's voice, suddenly louder, more theatrical. "Ah, you must be Margaret's daughter. Robin, isn't it? I've heard so much about you. I'm Professor Blackwood. Your mother and I have become quite the garden companions." I reached the gate, my hands shaking slightly as I punched in the code Daniel had provided. The lock clicked open, and I slipped through, careful to close it quietly behind me. The service area beyond was deserted, a small parking area for deliveries, bordered by tall shrubs that provided convenient cover. I waited there, heart pounding, until a sleek black car pulled up precisely at 2:30 p.m. The driver, a professional-looking woman in her 40s, stepped out and approached me. "Mrs. Harris?" she asked quietly. I nodded. "I'm Melissa from Candace Winter's office. I have the paperwork for you to sign before we proceed to the destination." She opened the rear door, and I slid into the car's cool interior. On the seat were several document folders, each labeled with Post-it notes for signatures. Melissa handed me a pen and briefly explained each document as I signed: forms transferring the bulk of my assets to new accounts under my exclusive control, paperwork establishing the charitable foundation that would receive a significant portion of my funds, and documents securing a modest trust for my grandson Donnie. As I signed the final page, a weight seemed to lift from my shoulders. For the first time in months, I was taking definitive action rather than simply reacting to my children's maneuvers. "Where to now, Mrs. Harris?" Melissa asked as she carefully stored the signed documents in her briefcase. "The Holton Grand downtown." "Please," I replied. "I have a reservation under the name Margaret Wilson, my maiden name." A small protection against immediate discovery. As we pulled away from Willow Creek, I resisted the urge to look back. Instead, I focused on the road ahead, on the city skyline gradually coming into view, on the future I was reclaiming, one signature at a time. The Holton Grand was an elegant older hotel in the city center, far enough from my former neighborhood to avoid accidental encounters, but still within the region I knew well. I checked in without incident, the receptionist barely glancing at the credit card issued in my maiden name. My suite on the 12th floor offered a panoramic view of the city park and the river beyond. After Melissa departed with the signed documents, promising to deliver them directly to Candace, I stood by the window for a long time, watching the ordinary rhythms of the world below. People strolling through the park, office workers hurrying back from late lunches, a young couple with a stroller pausing to admire the fountain. Normal life continuing, oblivious to the quiet revolution I had just staged in my own small corner of existence. I was just preparing to order room service when my cell phone rang. My real one, not the simplified version Robin had provided. The screen showed Donnie's number. "Grandma?" His voice was urgent, concerned. "Where are you? Mom's freaking out. She said you disappeared from Willow Creek. Are you okay?" The genuine worry in his tone touched me. Of all my family members, Donnie had always seen me most clearly. "I'm fine, sweetheart," I assured him. "Better than fine, actually. I've decided Willow Creek isn't right for me. Mom said—" He stopped himself, then continued more carefully. "She thinks you might be confused or In danger. The only danger I was in was losing my autonomy, I replied, keeping my voice gentle. Donnie, I need you to understand something. I left voluntarily. I'm perfectly safe and completely lucid. What I couldn't do was allow your mother and uncle to sell my home and take control of my finances. There was a pause, then a heavy sigh. I knew something wasn't right about all this. The way they rushed everything after your fall, it didn't make sense. No, it didn't, I agreed. They had their reasons, I suppose, but they weren't the reasons they claimed. Another pause. Where are you staying? I want to see you. Make sure you're really okay. I hesitated. I trusted Donnie, but he was still Robin's son. Not yet, I said finally. I need some time to finalize arrangements. But soon, I promise. Grandma, they're talking about calling the police, he warned. Mom's saying you're endangered or something. Uncle Jackson is meeting with the lawyer right now, so it had begun. The desperate scramble to regain control. I had anticipated this reaction, but hearing it confirmed still sent a chill through me. Donnie, listen carefully, I said. I'm going to have my lawyer contact your mother. She'll confirm that I'm perfectly capable of making my own decisions, and that any claims to the contrary will be vigorously contested. In the meantime, if you truly want to help me, don't tell them we've spoken. I won't, he promised. But Grandma, what's really going on? I mean, I know Mom can be controlling, but selling your house? Taking your money? That doesn't sound like her. The innocence in his question nearly broke my heart. He still saw his mother as I once had. Flawed, perhaps, but fundamentally well-intentioned. How could I explain to him that people are capable of stunning selfishness when money and convenience are at stake? How power corrupts even loving relationships? It's complicated, Donnie, I said instead. But I promise, when we meet, I'll explain everything. For now, just know that I'm safe and making my own choices. After we disconnected, I sat heavily on the edge of the hotel bed, the adrenaline of the day's events finally beginning to ebb. In its place came a profound exhaustion, but also an undeniable sense of liberation. For the first time in months, perhaps years, I was truly steering my own course. I ordered a simple dinner from room service, then contacted my personal attorney to alert her to the situation. She promised to issue a cease and desist letter immediately to prevent any further attempts to sell my house or access my accounts. She would also prepare to counter any potential claims about my mental competency. Based on what you've told me, they have very little legal ground to stand on, she assured me. The facility doctor's cursory evaluation won't hold up against a comprehensive independent assessment, which we'll arrange immediately. As night fell over the city, I watched the lights come on in buildings across the skyline. Tomorrow would bring challenges, legal maneuvers, emotional confrontations, difficult decisions. But tonight, in this quiet hotel room far from the nursing home where my children had attempted to warehouse me, I had reclaimed something precious. My life was my own again. Sleep eluded me that first night in the hotel. I lay awake in the unfamiliar bed, its luxury a stark contrast to the utilitarian furnishings of Willow Creek, yet comfort remained elusive. My mind raced with possibilities, consequences, and plans. By 3 a.m., I had given up on rest and sat at the small desk by the window, the city lights twinkling below like earthbound stars. I opened Daniel's laptop and began to write. Not a letter or a journal entry, but a comprehensive accounting of my assets, my intentions, and my reasoning. The document began clinically enough. Total assets as of May 15th, 317,428.56 primary. Residence, mortgage-free. Estimated value, $850,000 investment portfolio. Twin 360 Venevan 428 But as the night deepened, so did my reflections. I found myself writing not just about numbers, but about values. About the difference between supporting family and enabling entitlement. about the fine line between filial duty and personal autonomy, about the corrosive effect of unspoken expectations. I worked my entire adult life to build financial security, not just for myself, but for my children. I imagined this money as their inheritance, a final gift that would ease their burdens and perhaps bring them a measure of the security I had worked so hard to create. What I never imagined was that the prospect of this inheritance would transform them into people I barely recognize. People who view me not as a person with inherent dignity and rights, but as an obstacle between themselves and my resources. By dawn, I had made decisions that could never be unmade. The framework Candace and I had established now had purpose and direction, guided by clear-eyed assessment rather than emotional reaction. I would not disinherit my children entirely. That level of punitive response wasn't in my nature. But neither would they receive the windfall they clearly anticipated. Instead, I created a more nuanced approach. A modest trust for each child, $200,000 each, accessible only after my death, with the explicit provision that any attempt to contest my competency or control my assets during my lifetime will result in immediate forfeiture. A separate trust for Donnie, $500,000, accessible when he turns 30 or completes graduate education, whichever comes first. A small annual stipend, $15,000, available immediately for educational or entrepreneurial pursuits. The majority of my assets, $2,000, to establish the Wallace Harris Memorial Foundation for Educational Opportunity, providing scholarships to students from middle-income families, those often overlooked by traditional financial aid but still struggling with educational costs. The remainder, approximately $317,000, to fund my own independent living for the foreseeable future, with provisions for long-term care should it become necessary. My house to be sold only upon my explicit instruction or after my death, with proceeds directed to the foundation. As I finalized these decisions, the sun broke over the eastern horizon, painting the hotel room in soft gold light. I felt an unexpected sense of peace. This wasn't about revenge or punishment, but about realignment, bringing my resources into harmony with my values, rather than allowing them to become weapons. In a family power struggle, I emailed the completed document to Candace, asking her to integrate these specific directives into the legal framework we had established. Then I showered, ordered breakfast, and prepared to face what would undoubtedly be a day of confrontation. Didn't have to wait long. At precisely 9:15 a.m., my phone rang, Jackson's number flashing on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, Robin called. Then Jackson again. Then the family lawyer. In the span of an hour, I received 14 calls from various family members, including Avery, Robin's husband, who had never before called me directly. Only Donnie didn't call, honoring his promise from the day before. At 10:30 a.m., my own attorney called with an update. "They're moving quickly," she informed me. "Jackson has already filed for emergency guardianship, citing Dr. Lowell's assessment and your disappearance from the facility." "Can they succeed?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "Not likely," she assured me. "I've already filed our counterpetition and requested an independent evaluation. The judge has denied their request for emergency proceedings, which means they can't take any action regarding your assets until a full hearing." "And the house?" "I've filed notice with the county recorder's office. Any attempt to sell or transfer the property without your notarized consent will constitute fraud." Relief washed over me. The legal safeguards were in place. Now came the harder part, the emotional confrontation that couldn't be delegated to attorneys or handled through formal filings. At noon, I finally answered one of Robin's calls. "Mom!" Her voice was a mixture of anger and what sounded like genuine fear. "Where are you? We've been worried sick. The nursing home said you just walked out. They're liable, you know. We could sue them for negligence." "That won't be necessary," I replied calmly. "I left voluntarily. I'm perfectly safe. Safe where? Who's with you? Are you alone? The questions came rapid fire, each one underscoring her assumption that I couldn't possibly manage on my own. I'm at a hotel, I said. And yes, I'm alone by choice, not by circumstance. A hotel? Her voice rose in disbelief. Mom, you need to come home. Or back to Willow Creek. We can discuss options, but you can't just— I can and I have, I interrupted, my tone firm but not harsh. Robin, I need you to understand something fundamental. I am not coming back to Willow Creek. I am not signing power of attorney over to you and Jackson, and I am not allowing my house to be sold. Silence stretched between us for several seconds. When Robin spoke again, her voice had shifted to something harder, more controlled. You're not thinking clearly, she said. This behavior, sneaking out, hiding in hotels, it only confirms what Dr. Lowell said about your judgment being impaired. I've just had an independent neuropsychological evaluation, I countered. This morning, in fact. The results will be available to the court and to you once they're finalized. I suspect they'll tell a different story than Dr. Lowell's 12-minute assessment. Another silence, longer this time. I could almost hear the recalculation happening, the shift in strategy. Mom, she finally said, her voice softer, wounded. Why are you doing this? Why are you fighting us? We're your children. We love you. We're trying to protect you. The sincerity in her tone almost made me waver. Almost. But then I remembered the email to the lawyer about guardianship options, the house listing preparations conducted without my knowledge, the casual dismissal of my preferences, my autonomy, my very personhood. If you truly want to protect me, I said quietly, you'll respect my right to make my own decisions. You'll acknowledge that I am still capable of managing my own life. You'll stop treating me as a problem to be solved rather than a person to be respected. But your fall was minor, I finished for her. A stumble that resulted in nothing, more than a bruise. Not a reason to upend my entire life. Robin's voice hardened again. You don't understand the liability, the risks. If something happened to you alone in that house, something serious, then it would be my risk to take, I said firmly. My life, my choice. It's not that simple, she insisted. There are financial considerations. And there it was, the real concern, finally spoken aloud. Yes, I agreed. There are indeed financial considerations. Which brings me to the other reason for this conversation. I've made some changes to my estate planning that you and Jackson should be aware of. What kind of changes? Her voice was suddenly wary. Significant ones, I replied. The inheritance you and Jackson seem to have been counting on. The money you apparently anticipated would help fund a new house, pay off debts, perhaps finance early retirement, has been substantially restructured. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear Robin's breathing, slightly faster than normal, but nothing else. What does that mean? She finally asked, each word careful and measured. It means that the majority of my assets, approximately $3 million, will now primarily fund a charitable foundation. You and Jackson will receive modest trusts, conditional on respecting my autonomy for the remainder of my life. $3 million! She stopped abruptly. Mom, that's impossible. You don't have that kind of money. Dad left you the house and his pension, that's all. The absolute certainty in her voice might have been comical under different circumstances. Her confident assumption that she knew more about my finances than I did. I've been investing since before you were born, I said simply. Your father and I made certain choices, living modestly, avoiding debt, consistently setting aside portions of our income that allowed me to accumulate significant assets over time. Assets I had intended to leave entirely to you and Jackson, until recent events forced me to reconsider. Another prolonged silence. I could almost see Robin's expression, The disbelief, the calculations, the dawning realization of what she and Jackson had inadvertently set in motion with their attempts to control me. "We need to talk about this in person," she finally said. "All of us, you, me, Jackson. There's clearly been a misunderstanding. If you'll just tell us where you are." "Not yet," I cut her off gently. "I need time and space to implement these changes properly. My attorney will be in touch with yours regarding the guardianship petition, which I expect to be withdrawn immediately. Once that's resolved, we can discuss meeting." "Mom, please." "I love you, Robin," I said, meaning it despite everything. "You and Jackson both. I always will. But love doesn't require submission. It shouldn't demand the surrender of one's essential dignity." I ended the call before she could respond, my hand trembling slightly as I set down the phone. The confrontation I had dreaded was now behind me, though its consequences would likely reverberate for months, perhaps years to come. Outside my hotel window, the city continued its midday bustle, oblivious to the small earthquake that had just occurred in my family's foundation. I watched the pedestrians below, business people hurrying to lunch meetings, tourists consulting maps, young parents pushing strollers, and felt strangely connected to them all. Each person navigating their own complex web of relationships, choices, and consequences. For the first time in months, I felt not like an object being managed, but like a participant in that great human flow. A person with agency, with purpose, with the right to direct my own journey. Whatever came next, that awareness alone was worth the price of $3 million. The hotel became my sanctuary for the next 3 days. My attorney advised staying in a secure location until the guardianship petition was formally withdrawn and the independent neuropsychological evaluation was complete. I used the time to rest, regroup, and plan my next steps. On the second day, Candace arrived with additional documents requiring my signature and updates on the financial restructuring. "Everything is proceeding according to your instructions," she assured me, spreading papers across the hotel suite's dining table. "The foundation framework is established, the trusts are structured, and your personal accounts are secured against unauthorized access." "And my house?" I asked. "Your attorney has filed the necessary protections. No one can sell it without your explicit consent." She hesitated, then added, "There is, however, a complication we need to discuss." Something in her tone made me sit up straighter. "What kind of complication?" Candace removed a folder from her briefcase. "While reviewing the recent activity on your accounts, the ones Robin and Jackson had access to, I discovered some concerning transactions." She opened the folder and placed several bank statements before me. Highlighted in yellow were multiple transfers dating back nearly 2 years, small enough to escape immediate notice if one wasn't looking carefully, but substantial in aggregate. Over the past 23 months, approximately $247,000 has been transferred from your accessible accounts to Jackson's personal account and a business account belonging to Avery, Robin's husband. I stared at the statements, the highlighted figures swimming before my eyes. "These aren't loans I authorized." "No," Candace confirmed gently. "They appear to be systematic withdrawals, timed to avoid triggering fraud alerts. Most were conducted online using your credentials." The realization felt like a physical blow. My children hadn't just been planning to take control of my assets. They had already been helping themselves to my money for nearly 2 years. "Can we recover any of it?" I asked, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "Possibly, through legal action," Candace replied. "But I wanted you to be aware before we proceed. Legal recovery would involve filing charges for financial elder abuse, which would have significant consequences for both Robin and Jackson." I closed my eyes, absorbing this new betrayal. The money itself wasn't the issue. $247,000 was a substantial sum, but not crippling given my overall assets. What hurt was the calculated nature of the theft, the deliberate exploitation of my trust. "There's more," Candace said reluctantly. "While investigating these transactions, I discovered communications between Robin, Jackson, and their attorney dating back to shortly after Wallace's death. They've been planning to have you declared incompetent for over a year, waiting for an opportunity, like your fall, to implement their strategy." She handed me printed copies of emails. I read them slowly, each word a fresh wound. The clinical discussion of mother's declining capacity, the strategic planning for asset preservation, the thinly veiled excitement about unlocking estate value. My own children, discussing me as if I were already gone, my personhood dissolved into a collection of assets awaiting distribution. One exchange between Robin and Jackson stood out with particular clarity. "Mom's always been so secretive about money," Robin had written. "Dad must have left more than she's letting on. The house alone is worth close to $1 million in this market." Jackson's reply: "Once we have POA, we can get a complete picture. If there are hidden accounts, we'll find them. Better to handle this while she's still relatively healthy. Waiting until she's truly incapacitated would just complicate things." They hadn't known about the investments. That much was clear. But they had suspected there was more than I had revealed, and had been methodically positioning themselves to seize control before I could complicate things, by becoming genuinely incapacitated, or worse, by making independent decisions about my own resources. "I'm so sorry, Margaret," Candace said softly, her professional demeanor momentarily giving way to genuine compassion. "I debated whether to show you these at all, but you deserve to know the truth, especially before making final decisions about your state." I nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in my throat. Part of me wished she hadn't told me, hadn't shown me these concrete proofs of my children's betrayal. But deeper than that pain was a sense of clarity, a confirmation that my instincts had been correct, that my decision to protect myself hadn't been an overreaction. "What do you recommend?" I asked finally. Candace considered carefully before answering. "From a purely financial perspective, pursuing recovery of the misappropriated funds would be reasonable. From a personal perspective," she paused, "that depends entirely on what kind of relationship, if any, you hope to salvage with your children." The question hung in the air between us. What kind of relationship could survive this level of betrayal? What forgiveness could possibly bridge this chasm? "I need time to think," I said at last. "For now, let's continue with securing my assets and establishing the foundation. The decision about legal action can wait." After Candace left, I sat alone, by the window for hours, watching darkness fall over the city as I turned over this painful discovery in my mind. The methodical theft, the calculated planning, the casual dismissal of my agency. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Donnie, Grandma, things are crazy here. Mom and Uncle Jackson are freaking out about money stuff. Dad's saying you're being manipulated by someone. I don't know what's true anymore. Can we please meet? Just you and me?" The simple, direct request pierced through my haze of hurt and betrayal. Donnie at least deserved answers, honest ones, without the vindictiveness that might color Robin's and Jackson's versions of events. "Tomorrow, 2 p.m., I texted back. "The cafe at the art museum. Come alone." His reply was immediate. "I'll be there." "Love you." Those two simple words, "love you," brought unexpected tears to my eyes. In the midst of this family implosion, this reminder of genuine connection felt like a lifeline to a shore I'd feared was lost forever. The next day, I arrived at the museum cafe early, selecting a quiet table in the corner with a view of the entrance. The museum had always been one of my favorite places in the city, a refuge of beauty and contemplation I had often visited during difficult periods of my life. It seemed fitting to meet Donnie here, on neutral ground that still held personal meaning. I watched him enter precisely at 2 o'clock, scanning the cafe until he spotted me. At 23, he was the image of his grandfather at that age. Tall and lanky, with Wallace's thoughtful eyes and deliberate movements. Relief washed over. His face when he saw me, followed immediately by concern as he approached. "Grandma," he said, embracing me tightly before sitting down. "Are you really okay? There's so much crazy stuff happening. Mom crying 1 minute and yelling the next. Uncle Jackson talking about lawyers and courts. Dad's convinced someone is taking advantage of you." "I'm perfectly fine, Donnie," I assured him, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. "Better than I've been in months, actually. But yes, there's a significant disagreement between me and your mother and uncle." "About money?" he stated, rather than asked. "They keep saying things about your estate and assets and how someone's manipulating you. Mom said you told her you have millions of dollars?" I nodded slowly. "I do. Have significant assets, investments I've managed for decades, money I had intended as inheritance for your mother and uncle, and for you." His eyes widened. "But how? I mean, you and Grandpa always lived so normally." "That's precisely how," I smiled slightly. "By living within our means, avoiding debt, and consistently investing for the long term. Your grandfather and I made a choice early in our marriage to prioritize financial security over appearances. It's not mysterious or complicated, just the compound effect of discipline over time." "And now you're not giving it to Mom and Uncle Jackson?" His question was direct, but not accusatory. "I'm restructuring how it will be distributed," I clarified. "They'll still receive meaningful inheritances, but the majority will go to a foundation. For educational opportunities, something your grandfather would have deeply valued." Donnie was quiet for a moment, processing this information. "Because they tried to put you in a nursing home?" "Because they attempted to take control of my life and my resources without my consent," I corrected gently. "The nursing home was just a symptom of a larger problem. Their belief that they had the right to manage me as if I were already incapacitated." I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal about the financial exploitation I had discovered. Donnie deserved honesty, but he didn't need to carry the full burden of his parents' actions. "There's more to it," I continued carefully. "But the essential issue is about autonomy and respect. I'm still capable of managing my own affairs and making my own decisions. Your mother and uncle were unwilling to accept that reality." Donnie nodded slowly. "I knew something was off about how fast everything happened after your fall. Mom kept saying it was for your safety, but it felt, I don't know, orchestrated?" His perceptiveness didn't surprise me. Donnie had always been observant, sensitive, to undercurrents that others missed. "I've set aside a trust for you," I told him, changing the subject slightly. "It won't be accessible until you're 30 or complete graduate school, but there's an annual stipend available now if you need it for education or to start a business." His expression shifted to alarm. "Grandma, I don't want your money. That's not why I reached out. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." "I know that, sweetheart," I assured him. "The trust isn't a reward for loyalty or a bribe for support. It's an investment in your future, in the person I know you to be. It has nothing to do with the current situation with your mother and uncle." Relief softened his features. "Okay, but still, I don't need it right now. I'm doing fine with my job, and I've got scholarships for grad school next year. The option is there if you ever do need it," I said simply. "Now, tell me more about this graduate program you've been accepted to. Architecture, wasn't it?" For the next hour, we talked about his plans, his hopes, his concerns about the future. Not once did he press me for more details about the conflict with his parents or question my decisions regarding my estate. His respect for my privacy and autonomy was a balm to my wounded spirit, proof that the next generation might understand what the current one could not. As we prepared to leave, Donnie asked hesitantly, "Will you come back home eventually? To your house, I mean?" Yes, I said with more certainty than I actually felt. Once the legal issues are resolved and certain protections are in place, it's still my home after all. He hugged me tightly before we parted. I'm sorry about all of this, Grandma. I love you, and I just want you to be happy. I love you too, I replied, holding him close. More than you know. As I watched him walk away, his tall figure weaving through the museum crowd, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Sadness for what had been lost, gratitude for what remained, and an unexpected sense of hope, not for reconciliation with Robin, and Jackson, perhaps, but for the possibility that family bonds could survive in new forms, across generations, despite the painful fractures of the present. The legal battle I had hoped to avoid materialized despite my wishes. 3 days after my meeting with Donnie, Jackson officially filed the guardianship petition, claiming I was at imminent risk due to diminished capacity and undue influence from unknown parties. My attorney immediately countered with the results of my independent neuropsychological evaluation, which conclusively established my cognitive competence. We're in a stronger position than they are, my attorney, Elaine, assured me during our strategy meeting in her downtown office. Their petition relies almost entirely on Dr. Lowell's cursory assessment and your erratic behavior in leaving the facility. Our counter-evidence is substantially more comprehensive. But it will still go to court? I asked, dreading the public spectacle of a family at war. Unless they withdraw the petition, yes. The hearing is scheduled for 3 weeks from now. She straightened a stack of papers with precise movements. In the meantime, we need to prepare thoroughly. Your testimony will be crucial. For the next 3 weeks, I lived in a state of deliberate, focused preparation. I moved from the hotel to a furnished apartment with a month-to-month lease, a practical consideration rather than a concession to my children's demands. The apartment was modern, situated in a secure building with concierge service and located near both my attorney's office and the courthouse where the hearing would take place. Each day followed a structured routine. Mornings were devoted to reviewing financial documents with Candace, ensuring every transaction was documented, every account secured, every irregularity noted. Afternoons were spent with Elaine, preparing for potential cross-examination, reviewing the legal foundations of competency, and developing clear, composed responses to the allegations in Jackson's petition. They'll try to portray your actions as impulsive and irrational, Elaine warned during one of our sessions. They'll focus on your disappearance from Willow Creek, your refusal to return home, your sudden changes to your estate planning. We need to establish that each decision was rational, deliberate, and within your rights. I nodded, understanding the strategy. And the financial irregularities? The money they've been taking? Elaine's expression turned grave. That's our strongest countermeasure, but also the most damaging to any possibility of reconciliation. Once we introduce evidence of financial exploitation, the dynamics shift dramatically. Are you prepared for that consequence? Was I? The question haunted my quieter moments. Exposing Robin's and Jackson's systematic theft would likely sever our relationship permanently. Yet concealing it felt like enabling further exploitation, accepting the role of victim they had assigned me. I need to think about it, I told Elaine. Let's prepare the evidence but hold it in reserve for now. When I wasn't working with Candace or Elaine, I focused on rebuilding my physical strength. The enforced inactivity at Willow Creek had left me more frail than I wanted to admit. Each morning and evening, I walked the perimeter of the park near my temporary apartment, gradually increasing my distance and pace. I found a senior yoga class at a nearby community center and attended 3 times weekly, reclaiming flexibility I had thought permanently lost. You're making remarkable progress, the instructor commented after my second week. Most people your age struggle with these balance poses, but you've got natural stability. I used to garden, I explained. Hours of squatting, bending, reaching, the body remembers. My garden. I missed it with an ache that surprised me. Not just the plants themselves, but the rhythm of tending them, the quiet communion with growing things, the tangible connection to the passing seasons. The apartment windows faced west, offering spectacular sunsets but no space for even the smallest container plants. Another temporary sacrifice in service of the larger goal. Throughout this period of intensive preparation, I maintained limited contact with my family. Robin called daily at first, then weekly, as it became clear I wouldn't be persuaded to return to Willow Creek or abandon my legal defense. Jackson didn't call at all after filing the petition, communicating exclusively through his attorney. Only, Donnie maintained regular contact, texting every few days with casual updates about his life or brief words of encouragement. Saw the first fireflies of the season last night and thought of you. Remember how we used to catch them in jars in your backyard? Passed by your garden yesterday. The peonies are blooming like crazy. Mrs. Feldman from next door said she's watering. Everything for you. These small connections to my previous life were precious lifelines, reminding me what I was fighting for. Not just financial autonomy, but the right to return to the home I loved, to the life I had built. 2 weeks before the hearing, Daniel from Willow Creek contacted me through the secure email account he had created for our communications. Thought you should know. Your daughter was here yesterday, questioning the staff about your escape. She seems convinced someone helped you leave. She specifically asked about me, whether we had become unusually close. The administration has asked me to speak with them tomorrow. I will, of course, be circumspect, but I wanted you to be aware. I replied immediately, "Thank you for the warning. Please don't put yourself at risk on my account. If questioned directly, you should feel free to confirm we were acquaintances who occasionally conversed in the garden. Nothing more, nothing less." His response came that evening. Already done. I admitted to our conversations but expressed surprise at your departure. Told them I assumed you had gone to visit family with proper clearance. The director seemed satisfied. Your daughter less so, but without evidence she could press no further. Take care, Margaret. The resistance continues. His message brought both relief and concern. Relief that he had navigated the questioning without complication. Concern that Robin was still actively investigating, seeking someone to blame for her loss of control. The hearing date approached. Practical considerations for my long-term arrangements became increasingly urgent. I couldn't live indefinitely in a temporary apartment, especially if the court ruled in my favor and confirmed my right to independent living. We should discuss your housing plans, Candace suggested during one of our final preparation sessions. Assuming a favorable outcome at the hearing, where do you intend to live? In my own home, I replied without hesitation. She nodded, but her expression remained concerned. That may not be practical immediately. Your children have had access to the property for weeks. We don't know what changes they might have made, what monitoring they might have installed, or how they might react to your return. The thought of my home being invaded, perhaps altered in my absence, sent a chill through me. I hadn't considered that they might have taken such steps, though in retrospect, it seemed obvious they would. What do you suggest? I asked. A transitional plan, Candace replied. First, we conduct a thorough inspection of the property. Professional. Security consultants checking for surveillance devices. Locks changed. Security system updated. Second, we arrange for household support. Not live-in care, which would echo the control dynamic you're fighting against, but regular visits from cleaning services, meal delivery, perhaps a gardener for the heavier outdoor work. And third, we establish clear boundaries through legal channels. A formal cease and desist order preventing Robin and Jackson from entering the property without explicit invitation. Video surveillance at entry points. Documentation of all interactions. The measures sounded extreme, almost paranoid. Yet the Systematic financial exploitation and the calculated effort to have me declared incompetent suggested that such precautions might be necessary. It sounds like preparing for war, I observed quietly. I prefer to think of it as establishing peace through strength, Candace countered. Once clear boundaries are established and enforced, relationships can potentially heal over time. But boundaries without enforcement are merely suggestions, and suggestions are easily ignored by those who believe they know better than you what's best for you. As I considered Candace's recommendations, I realized that the coming court hearing was not just about establishing my competency or protecting my assets. It was about fundamentally redefining my relationship with my adult children, shifting from implicit trust to verified boundaries, from assumed access to earned privilege, from hierarchical authority, theirs over mine, to mutual respect between autonomous adults. It was a painful transition, but perhaps a necessary one, not just for me, but for them as well. The Sunday before the hearing, I sat at the small desk in my temporary apartment and began writing 3 letters, one to Robin, one to Jackson, and one to Donnie. Not legal documents or financial accountings, but personal communications from mother to children, from grandmother to grandson. I wouldn't send them yet. The hearing would determine whether they would be offers of reconciliation or final farewells. But writing them helped clarify my own heart, my own boundaries, my own capacity for both accountability and forgiveness. I sealed each letter in its own envelope. I felt strangely lighter. Whatever the outcome of the legal proceedings, I had done everything in my power to prepare, not just financially and legally, but emotionally as well. The rest would unfold according to its own logic, beyond my control, but not beyond my capacity, to meet with dignity and clarity. The courtroom was smaller than I had imagined, more intimate and therefore more uncomfortable for the family drama about to unfold within its wood-paneled walls. I arrived an hour early on Elaine's advice, dressed in a tailored navy suit that conveyed both dignity and competence. My hair was freshly styled, my makeup subtle but deliberate, small details that shouldn't matter in a legal proceeding based on cognitive ability, but which Elaine assured me would create a visual counter-argument to any claims of decline. Appearance matters, she had explained during our final preparation session. Judges are human. They respond to nonverbal cues as much as legal arguments. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Elaine beside me, her calm presence a steadying influence as the courtroom gradually filled. The neuropsychologist who had conducted my comprehensive evaluation was already seated in the witness area, reviewing her notes with professional focus. At precisely 9:45 a.m., Robin and Jackson entered with their attorney, a sharp-featured man whose expensive suit and aggressive stride suggested both high fees and confrontational tactics. Robin looked pale and drawn, dark circles beneath her eyes betraying sleepless nights. Jackson's expression was harder, his jaw set in defiance or determination. Neither looked in my direction as they took their seats at the defense table. Judge Miranda Thornton entered at 10 a.m. sharp, a middle-aged woman with silver-streaked hair and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. Her demeanor was brisk but not unkind as she called the court to order and outlined the day's proceedings. "This is a competency hearing," she began, scanning the documents before her. "The burden of proof lies with the petitioners to demonstrate clear evidence of diminished capacity warranting guardianship. I'll hear opening statements, review expert testimony, and then hear from the principals involved." Jackson's attorney rose first, presenting a narrative of gradual decline accelerated by grief after my husband's death, culminating in erratic behavior, financial irresponsibility, and vulnerability to exploitation. He emphasized my unexplained disappearance from Willow Creek and my sudden irrational changes to long-established financial arrangements. Elaine's opening was concise and devastating in its simplicity. "Your Honor, this case is not about Mrs. Harris's cognitive capacity, which has been conclusively established by comprehensive evaluation. This is about control of substantial assets that her children discovered only recently. Assets they have already been systematically misappropriating through unauthorized transfers over the past 2 years. Robin visibly flinched. Jackson's face flushed red. Their attorney leaned toward them, whispering urgently as Elaine continued, outlining the financial exploitation with clinical precision. As promised, she had prepared this counter-argument, but had held it in reserve, waiting for my final decision on whether to deploy it. That morning, before entering the courtroom, I had given her my answer. Yes. The full truth must be told, whatever the emotional consequences. The hearing proceeded with methodical intensity. The neuropsychologist presented her findings, confirming, my cognitive functioning was well above average for age cohort in all assessed domains. Dr. Lowell, when cross-examined by Elaine, was forced to admit the limitations of his brief evaluation and the possibility of situational factors influencing his conclusions. Then Candace took the stand, presenting documentation of the unauthorized financial transfers from my accounts to Jackson's personal account and Avery's business. The evidence was irrefutable. Dates, amounts, account numbers, all highlighted in damning yellow. By the time I was called to testify, the momentum had shifted decisively. Judge Thornton's questions focused not on my competency, but on my awareness of the financial exploitation and my plans going forward. I became fully aware of the unauthorized transfers only recently, I explained calmly. Had I known earlier, I would have taken action sooner. As for my future plans, I intend to return to my home with appropriate support services for routine maintenance and continue managing my own financial affairs as I have successfully done for decades. And your relationship with your children? The judge asked, her expression unreadable. I paused, weighing my words carefully. That will depend on their choices going forward. I remain open to reconciliation, but only with clear boundaries and genuine respect for my autonomy. Robin started to rise at that point, her face contorted with some unspoken emotion, but her attorney firmly pulled her back into her seat. Judge Thornton's ruling came swiftly after a brief recess. The petition for guardianship is denied. The court finds no compelling evidence of diminished capacity warranting such intervention. Furthermore, the court orders a freeze on all accounts involved in the unauthorized transfers pending potential criminal investigation. Mrs. Harris is free to return to her home and manage her affairs as she sees fit. The gavel fell with decisive finality. In that moment, watching Robin's shoulders collapse and Jackson's jaw clench in defeat, I felt no triumph, no vindication, only a profound sadness for what had been irreparably broken and a quiet resolve to move forward regardless. As Elaine gathered our documents and the courtroom began to clear, I stood on slightly shaky legs, suddenly aware of how much energy the proceeding had consumed. Through the courtroom's tall windows, I could see clear blue sky and branches swaying in a gentle breeze, the world continuing its ordinary miracle of existence, oblivious to the small human dramas unfolding within man-made walls. Ready to go home? Elaine asked gently. Not to the temporary apartment, I realized, but to my actual home. The house where I had raised my children, loved my husband, tended my garden. The place that was mine by right and by history. Yes, I replied, drawing a deep breath. I'm ready. The locksmith finished changing the last deadbolt at precisely 3:47 p.m. I signed his invoice, accepted the new keys, and thanked him for his efficiency. He was the fourth service provider to visit my home that day, preceded by the security consultant who swept for surveillance devices, finding none, thankfully, the alarm company technician who updated the system with new codes and monitoring, protocols, and the cleaning service that removed 3 weeks of accumulated dust. All set, Mrs. Harris, the locksmith said, gathering his tools. These are high-security locks. Can't be picked or bumped like standard ones. Only these keys will work unless you authorize additional copies. I thanked him again and closed the seal, Dector behind him, turning the new deadbolt with a satisfying click. Alone at last in my own home, I leaned against the door and allowed myself to fully feel the weight of returning, the complex mixture of relief, sadness, determination, and tentative hope that had been building since the court hearing 3 days earlier. The house felt both familiar and strange, like meeting an old friend after a long separation. The furniture was the same, the pictures on the walls unchanged, yet something fundamental had shifted. Perhaps it wasn't the house at all, but me. I had left as one person and returned as another, transformed by confrontation and choice. I moved slowly through each room, reacquainting myself with the spaces that had shaped my life for 4 decades. In the kitchen, I ran my hands along the countertops Wallace had installed himself, the slight unevenness near the sink a testament to his enthusiastic but imperfect craftsmanship. In the living room, I straightened the family photos: Robin's college graduation, Jackson with his first child, now a teenager, Donnie as a gap-toothed 7-year-old proudly holding a science fair ribbon. Despite everything, these moments had been real. These connections had existed. The betrayal didn't erase the love that had come before, though it forever altered its expression. The garden drew me outside as twilight approached. Mrs. Feldman from next door had indeed been watering, as Donnie had reported, but 3 weeks of minimal care showed in the overgrown beds and emerging weeds. Oddly, I found the slight disarray comforting rather than distressing. Tangible work that needed doing, purpose that required no justification beyond the satisfaction of nurturing growing things. The next morning, I rose early and made a deliberate decision. Today would be the first day of my reclaimed life, not a continuation of what had come before. After breakfast, I called a landscaper recommended by my attorney, not to replace my own gardening, but to help restore the more demanding areas that had suffered during my absence. Then I contacted an interior designer, something I had never considered during Wallace's lifetime or in the years following his death. "I'd like to refresh the master bedroom and bath," I explained when she arrived for the consultation. "Something that reflects who I am now, not who I was as part of a couple or as a mother of young children." She nodded with immediate understanding. "A space that honors your past, but embraces your present. Let's explore some possibilities." By the end of the week, my home had begun its subtle transformation. Not a rejection of memories, but an evolution that paralleled my own. The master bedroom's heavy furniture was replaced with lighter pieces that created more open space. The bathroom was scheduled for renovation, converting the rarely used tub into a walk-in shower with built-in seating and handrails that were both stylish and practical. Aging-in-place design, the designer called it. Beautiful and functional, for the long term. The garden, too, underwent thoughtful reconfiguration. The landscaper helped divide the space into manageable sections, some that I would maintain entirely myself, others where he would handle the heavier tasks while I focused on the planting and daily care. "We're not taking away your garden," he assured me, understanding my hesitation. "We're making it sustainable for you to enjoy for years to come." These practical changes were important, but the more profound transformation was happening internally. Each decision made without seeking permission or approval, each modification that reflected my preferences alone, reinforced my reclaimed autonomy. I was no longer defining myself primarily as Wallace's widow or Robin and Jackson's mother, but as Margaret, a woman with her own distinct identity, preferences, and purpose. 2 weeks after returning home, I received a formal letter from Robin and Jackson's attorney, requesting a meeting to discuss family matters and potential reconciliation. I shared it with Elaine, who advised caution. "They're still processing the financial revelations and the court's ruling," she said. "This could be a genuine olive branch, or it could be another attempt to regain access to your assets. I'd recommend a neutral location with your attorney. Present." I considered her advice, then made my own decision. I would meet them, but not yet. Not until I felt firmly established in my new reality. Not until the physical transformation of my home matched the internal transformation of my identity. Not until I could face them from a position of unshakable self-knowledge rather than reactive defensiveness. My reply was brief, but not unkind. I appreciate your outreach. I am open to discussion in the near future, but need additional time to settle into my home and establish my independent arrangements. I will contact you when I'm ready to meet, perhaps in 3 to 4 weeks. In the meantime, I focused on rebuilding other connections. I rejoined my old book club, where I was welcomed back with warmth and tactful avoidance of probing questions. I accepted a lunch invitation from former colleagues at the credit union, some of whom had retired years before. I even reached out to an art class I had always wanted to try, but had repeatedly postponed. "It's never too late to begin," the instructor said when I expressed concern about my lack of artistic background. In fact, sometimes life experience gives you a deeper well to draw from than technical training. I thought often of Daniel during this period, wondering how he was faring at Willow Creek, whether he had found other quiet rebels to share the garden bench. I sent him a brief message through our secure email channel. "The resistance continues, but now from home base. Thank you for being my ally when I most needed one. If your situation ever changes, know that you have a friend on the outside." His reply came 2 days later. "Delighted to hear of your successful liberation. My situation remains unchanged, but your example provides daily inspiration. Some battles are fought not by escaping one's circumstances, but by finding freedom within them. Carry on, brave friend." As spring deepened into early summer, my transformed home began to feel truly mine in a way it never had before, not even during Wallace's lifetime, when compromises and shared preferences had shaped our living space. For the first time in decades, perhaps for the first time ever, I was living entirely according to my own rhythms and choices. The woman who had entered Willow Creek, compliant, uncertain, accustomed to accommodation, had departed. In her place stood someone both new and familiar, the essential Margaret who had always existed beneath the accumulated layers of social expectation and family obligation. It was this woman who would eventually face Robin and Jackson, not as a mother seeking their approval or acceptance, but as an autonomous being offering relationship on new, more equitable terms. Whether they could accept this transformation remained to be seen. The invitation arrived 6 weeks after my return home. A beautifully printed card from the Wallace Harris Memorial Foundation for Educational Opportunity, requesting my presence at their inaugural scholarship awards ceremony. Though I had established the foundation and transferred the bulk of my assets to fund it, the day-to-day operations were managed by a board of trustees, professional educators who shared Wallace's passion for accessible education. I had deliberately maintained distance from the foundation's activities, wanting its mission to develop independently of my personal situation. This invitation marked their first direct outreach, their first acknowledgement of me not just as the founder, but as someone they wished to publicly honor. The ceremony was held at the university where Wallace had occasionally taught evening history courses after retiring from the high school. The auditorium was modestly filled, perhaps 100 people, including the scholarship recipients, their families, board members, and university officials. I sat in the reserved front row, unexpectedly nervous. Dean Matthews, the foundation's chairperson, opened the proceedings with a brief history of the organization's formation and mission. Then, to my surprise, she invited me to the podium. "We are honored to have with us today the visionary behind this foundation." Margaret Harris not only provided the financial resources that make these scholarships possible, but embodied throughout her life the values of education, financial literacy, and personal dignity that our foundation seeks to promote. The applause as I approached the podium was warm, genuine, and completely unexpected. I had prepared no remarks, had not anticipated being asked to speak. Yet as I looked out at the faces before me, particularly the young scholarship recipients, their expressions bright with hope and possibility. Words came naturally. My late husband Wallace believed that education was not merely about acquiring knowledge, but about developing the capacity for independent thought and self-determination. I began. The scholarships you receive today are not charity. They are investments in your potential, in your dreams, and in your fundamental right to shape your own futures. I spoke briefly about Wallace's dedication to his students, about our shared belief in education as a pathway to autonomy, and about the importance of financial literacy alongside academic achievement. As I concluded, I found myself addressing the scholarship recipients directly. The funds you receive today come with no strings attached except those you choose to acknowledge. Use them wisely, but according to your own definitions of wisdom. Build lives that reflect your values, not others' expectations. And remember that true wealth is measured not by the assets you accumulate, but by the freedom you maintain to direct your own journey. The standing ovation that followed caught me completely off guard. Dean Matthews embraced me as I returned to my seat, whispering, "That was perfect. Exactly what these young people needed to hear." Later, during the reception, I was approached by students, parents, and university officials, all expressing gratitude, not just for the financial support, but for the philosophy behind it. One mother gripped my hands tightly, tears in her eyes. "My daughter is the first in our family to attend university," she said. "This scholarship means everything, but your words today, about autonomy and self-determination, those were the greater gift." As I drove home that evening, the sunset painting the western sky in shades of gold and amber, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't experienced since before Wallace's death. The foundation was not just a redirection of assets away from Robin and Jackson. It was the creation of something meaningful, something that would outlast me and extend Wallace's legacy in ways he would have deeply valued. For the first time since the painful discoveries and confrontations, I felt not just validated in my decisions, but elevated by them, transformed from victim to benefactor, from someone fighting for personal autonomy to someone empowering others to secure their own. Exactly 3 months after the court hearing, I finally agreed to meet with Robin and Jackson. The meeting was scheduled at my attorney's office, neutral territory that provided both symbolic and practical protections. Elaine would be present for the first part of the discussion, then leave us for a private family conversation, if all parties agreed it was appropriate. I arrived 15 minutes early, mentally preparing myself for what would undoubtedly be a difficult encounter. The woman who entered Elaine's conference room that morning was markedly different from the one who had sat in the courtroom 3 months earlier. Not just in appearance, though the stylish haircut and well-tailored clothing reflected my evolving self-image, but in fundamental stance and energy. Robin and Jackson arrived precisely on time, accompanied by their attorney. Robin looked thinner than before, shadows beneath her eyes suggesting ongoing stress. Jackson's demeanor was subdued, his usual confident bearing noticeably diminished. They sat across the table, avoiding direct eye contact. Their attorney spoke first, outlining their desire for family reconciliation and proposing a structured visitation schedule that would rebuild trust while respecting boundaries. The proposal included regular supervised visits, gradual reintegration into family events, and a path toward potential financial restoration, contingent on demonstrated good faith. When he finished, Elaine turned to me. "Mrs. Harris, would you like to respond?" I looked directly at my children for the first time since entering the room. "I appreciate the structured approach," I began, my voice steady and calm. "But I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding here. I'm not a wayward child needing to be reintegrated into the family. I'm not on probation, requiring supervised visits to prove my reliability. I am your mother, but I am also an autonomous individual with the right to determine my own relationships." Robin's eyes filled with tears. Jackson's jaw tightened. The court has confirmed my competence, I continued. The financial evidence speaks for itself. Any reconciliation must begin with acknowledgement of those realities, not proposals that subtly reinforce the dynamics that brought us to this point. Mom, Robin finally spoke, her voice breaking slightly. We were worried about you. Maybe we went about it wrong. But our intentions— Were your intentions behind the $247,000 taken from my accounts? I asked quietly. Were those transfers motivated by concern for my welfare? Jackson flushed dark red. That was different. We were managing family resources during a difficult time. Without my knowledge or consent, I pointed out. That's not management. It's misappropriation. The conversation stalled into uncomfortable silence. Their attorney attempted to redirect toward common ground and family values, but I raised my hand to interrupt. I think we need that private conversation now, I said, looking to Elaine. She nodded, and after a brief conference, both attorneys agreed to step out, leaving me alone with my children. Once the door closed, the pretense of formal negotiation dissolved. Robin began crying in earnest. Jackson stared at the table, jaw working as if chewing unspoken words. I didn't come here to cause you pain, I said softly. But I can't pretend the past months didn't happen. I can't act as if your actions didn't. Reveal something fundamental about how you view me and my place in your lives. It wasn't like that, Robin insisted through tears. We were trying to protect your assets, our family legacy. My assets, I corrected gently. Earned through my work, managed through my decisions, designated according to my values, not a communal resource to be allocated by committee. Jackson finally looked up, anger and hurt competing in his expression. So you're punishing us, taking everything we thought would be ours someday and giving it to strangers? The question revealed more than he perhaps intended. The lingering resentment, the continued sense of entitlement, the perception of my choices as punitive rather than principled. I'm not punishing you, I replied. I'm making choices that align with my values, just as you made choices that aligned with yours. The foundation honors your father's lifelong commitment to education. The trusts I've established for you, while smaller than you anticipated, remain substantial gifts, not obligations I owed. Robin brushed tears from her cheeks, visibly struggling to regain composure. What about family? Doesn't that mean anything to you anymore? The question struck at the heart of our conflict. This fundamental difference in how we defined family obligation. Family means everything to me, I replied carefully. But family should be built on mutual respect, not control. On love, not ownership. On supporting each other's autonomy, not managing each other's resources. That sounds nice in theory, Jackson said bitterly. But the reality is, you've cut us out of your life and your estate because we made one mistake. It wasn't one mistake, I interrupted, my voice remaining calm but firm. It was a pattern of behavior stretching back years. The unauthorized transfers, the secret consultations with lawyers about having me declared incompetent, the immediate move to sell my house after placing me in Willow Creek. These weren't impulsive. Errors but calculated decisions that revealed how you truly saw me, not as a person with rights and agency, but as an asset to be managed and ultimately liquidated. The starkness of my assessment seemed to shock them both into silence. I'm not saying reconciliation is impossible, I continued more gently, but it must be built on new terms. I will not be monitored, supervised, or managed. I will not justify my spending or explain my choices. I will not be treated as diminished or incompetent because of my age. Then what do you want from us? Robin asked, genuine confusion in her voice. The same thing I've always wanted, to be seen and respected as the person I am, not the person you find it convenient for me to be. To have relationship, not oversight. To be your mother, but also myself. Jackson shook his head slowly. I don't even know what that means in practical terms. It means we start with small, ordinary interactions, I explained. Perhaps lunch once a month in a public place. Phone calls that don't include questions about my finances or living arrangements. Holiday gatherings where I'm treated as a participant, not a responsibility. And the money? He asked, the question clearly foremost in his mind. The foundation? The trusts? That's all finalized? No going back? The financial arrangements are complete, I confirmed. And focusing on what can't be changed will only prevent us from building what might still be possible. Robin wiped her eyes again. I don't know if I can just move forward and pretend none of this happened. I'm not asking for pretense, I said. I'm suggesting that we acknowledge what happened and choose consciously how we want to proceed. The past can't be undone, but it doesn't have to dictate our future unless we allow it to. The remainder of our meeting was tentative, uncomfortable, but not entirely without hope. We agreed to a simple lunch the following month, just Robin. And me at first, with Jackson to follow if that initial meeting went well. There were no promises beyond that, no grand commitments to immediate reconciliation. As they prepared to leave, I reached into my purse and withdrew the 3 sealed letters I had written before the court hearing, the ones I had been uncertain whether to send. I handed Robin and Jackson their respective envelopes. When you're ready, these might help you understand my perspective better, I said. They're not accusations or defenses, just honest reflections on our relationship and my hopes for its future. Whatever form that might take. Jackson took his letter without comment, tucking it into his jacket pocket. Robin held hers in both hands, staring at my handwriting on the envelope as if trying to decipher a code. What about Donnie? She asked suddenly. We know you've been in contact with him. He's an adult making his own choices, I replied simply, just as we all are. After they left, I remained seated in the conference room, feeling strangely hollow, yet unburdened. The confrontation I had dreaded for months was behind me now. It had brought neither the vindication of complete understanding nor the closure of true reconciliation. Only the quiet acknowledgement that some fractures can be managed, but never fully healed. Elaine returned, sitting beside me without speaking, offering silent support. Do you think families ever really recover from something like this? I finally asked her. She considered the question carefully before answering. Some do, some don't. But either way, you've created the possibility for something new to grow, even if it's not what existed before. The lunch with Robin took place exactly as planned, at a small French bistro downtown, public enough to encourage civil behavior, but quiet enough for genuine conversation. I arrived first, selecting a corner table that offered both privacy and a view of the restaurant's entrance. When Robin appeared precisely at noon, I noticed she had taken unusual care with her appearance. Her hair freshly styled, her outfit more formal than the occasion required. You look lovely, I said as she settled into her seat. That color suits you. She seemed momentarily surprised by the ordinary compliment, then offered a small smile. Thank you. You look well too, Mom. Different somehow. I feel different, I acknowledged. More myself, perhaps. The conversation that followed was cautious but not entirely artificial. We avoided the most contentious topics, the court hearing, the financial arrangements, the nursing home, focusing instead on neutral subjects. Robin spoke about her work. I shared details about my garden renovations. We both asked after Donnie, though from different perspectives and with different levels of knowledge about his current activities. Halfway through the meal, during a lull in conversation, Robin reached into her purse and withdrew the unopened letter I had given her. I read it, she said quietly, placing it on the table between us. 3 times, actually. I waited, giving her space to continue at her own pace. You wrote that you've loved being a mother, but that you were a person before you became one, and would remain a person after your children were grown. Her voice wavered slightly. That parenthood was a chapter in your life, not the entire book. Yes, I confirmed. Not because I love you less, but because my identity encompasses more than just being your mother. She nodded slowly. I never really saw you that way. As someone separate from us. From your role in our lives. Her fingers traced the edge of the envelope. You also wrote that the money was never meant to be a leash. It wasn't, I said. It was meant to be a gift, freely given. We saw it differently, she admitted. As something owed. As compensation for, I don't know, for everything. The honesty, however uncomfortable, felt like the first genuine exchange we'd had in years, perhaps ever. I'm not ready to forgive everything, Robin continued after a pause. The foundation, the reduced inheritance. It still feels like punishment, whatever you say. I understand, I replied. I'm not asking for immediate forgiveness or pretending the hurt doesn't exist on both sides. Just for the possibility of something new between us. Something new, she repeated thoughtfully. Not what was, but what might be. As we finished our meal and prepared to part, Robin hesitated, then asked the question that perhaps mattered most. Do you regret it? Walking away from Willow Creek, confronting us, in court, changing everything? I considered my answer carefully, knowing its importance. No, I said finally. I regret the pain it caused, but not the choice itself. Some prices are too high, even for family harmony. The surrender of my essential selfhood would have been such a price. We parted with a brief, somewhat awkward embrace, and a tentative plan to meet again the following month. No dramatic reconciliation, no tearful epiphanies. Just small steps toward a relationship rebuilt on more authentic foundations. As I drove home alone, I felt the weight of my choice again. Its cost, its consequences, and its absolute necessity. Some decisions, once made, must be continually reaffirmed, not because of doubt, but because their significance demands ongoing commitment. This was such a choice. I hadn't anticipated becoming something of a symbol. It began with a small story in the local newspaper, a human interest piece about the Foundation's scholarship program, including a brief mention of its unusual origin. The reporter, more thorough than I expected, had uncovered public court records from the guardianship hearing and included a paragraph about my legal battle for autonomy against my own children. The story might have ended there, confined to local interest had it not been for a popular blog focused on elder issues that picked it up, expanding the narrative and framing it within larger societal concerns about aging, family dynamics, and financial control. From there, it snowballed. A national magazine interview, a radio segment, invitations to speak at senior advocacy groups. You've struck a nerve, Daniel commented during one of our regular phone conversations. We had remained in contact after my departure from Willow Creek, and he had recently moved to assisted living facility of his own choosing, a significant victory he attributed partly to my example. Your story isn't just personal anymore. It's become a mirror reflecting issues many families never discuss openly. He was right. Each public appearance brought waves of responses, some supportive, others critical, all passionate. In community, centers, and church basements, senior citizens shared similar experiences of infantilization and financial pressure from adult children. Online forums filled with heated debates about filial responsibility versus parental autonomy. One woman approached me after a small community talk, tears streaming down her face. I gave everything to my son, she confided. My savings, my house, everything. He promised to take care of me, but now I live in his basement while he and his wife drive new cars bought with my money. I thought I was alone in feeling erased. Others were less sympathetic. Selfish, one online commenter labeled me. Throwing away family loyalty for personal freedom. Another wrote, "Wait until she needs real care. Then she'll regret pushing away the only people who would have provided it." The criticism stung, but I understood its source. My choices challenged powerful cultural narratives about aging parents, that they should be grateful for any care provided, that their needs and preferences become secondary to family convenience, that financial assets naturally flowed downward to adult children regardless of circumstances. I was careful in my public comments, never demonizing Robin and Jackson, always acknowledging the complexity of family relationships. "This isn't about villains and victims," I often said. "It's about recognizing that personhood doesn't diminish with age, and that love without respect isn't really love at all." 6 months after the court hearing, I received an unexpected call from a publishing house. They wanted to discuss a potential book, not a sensationalized memoir about family betrayal, but a thoughtful examination of aging, autonomy, and the changing nature of family obligation in modern society. "Your story provides a framework," the editor explained, "but we're interested in the larger questions it raises. How do we balance family interdependence with individual self-determination? What does genuine respect for elder autonomy look like in practical terms? When does support become control?" The proposal gave me pause. Writing such a book would mean greater public exposure, potential additional strain on my already fragile relationship with Robin and Jackson, and a significant commitment of time and energy. Yet it also offered an opportunity to transform personal pain into collective insight, to expand the conversation beyond my individual circumstances to broader, social questions. After careful consideration and consultation with Elaine, who reviewed the contract with professional thoroughness, I agreed. The advance was modest. I had insisted that any proceeds beyond expenses go to the foundation. But the opportunity felt significant in ways that transcended financial compensation. "You're not just reclaiming your own narrative," Donnie observed, when I told him about the project. "You're helping others reclaim theirs." His support meant everything, especially as Robin and Jackson had responded to news of my growing public profile with renewed distance. Our tentative reconciliation had stalled, each public mention of the conflict reopening wounds still tender from the initial confrontation. "They'll come around," Daniel assured me during one of our calls, though neither of us really believed it. "Or they won't. Either way, you're living your truth." Living my truth. The phrase might have seemed trite in another context, but it captured something essential about the path I had chosen. Not just freedom from control, but freedom to be fully myself, to make choices aligned with my values rather than others' expectations. To stand firmly in my own authority, even when doing so disrupted comfortable patterns of relationship. As autumn turned toward winter, I began the slow, deliberate process of gathering material for the book, each interview and conversation reaffirming the choice that had set everything in motion, the refusal to disappear quietly into a diminished version of myself, regardless of the cost. The first anniversary of my departure from Willow Creek arrived with surprising gentleness. I had anticipated some visceral reaction, perhaps renewed anger or lingering grief, but instead found myself greeting the day with quiet contemplation. I spent the morning in my garden, which had evolved as significantly as I had over the past year. The formerly labor-intensive beds had been thoughtfully redesigned for accessibility and sustainability. Native plants that required less maintenance now comprised the majority of the landscape, though I had maintained special sections for my beloved English roses and the herbs I still use daily in cooking. As I carefully pruned a lavender bush, breathing in its calming fragrance, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The court battle that had seemed so definitive at the time now appeared as merely one chapter in a longer narrative of transformation. The pain remained, but its edges had softened, contextual rather than consuming. That afternoon, I met Daniel for lunch at a riverside cafe. Since moving to his chosen assisted living community, he had thrived, teaching literature classes for fellow residents, establishing a classical music appreciation circle, even beginning a modest romantic relationship with a retired concert pianist. At 83, he embodied the principle that had guided my own choices. That age might change our circumstances, but need not diminish our essential personhood. A year, he mused, raising his glass in a subtle toast. Does it feel like victory? I considered the question carefully. Not victory, I replied finally. Resolution, perhaps, or alignment. The sensation of living in accordance with one's deepest values, whatever the cost. He nodded, understanding instantly what others might have required paragraphs to grasp. The unexamined life and all that, he said with a small smile, though Socrates never mentioned how damned uncomfortable the examined one can be. We shared a knowing laugh, the kind possible only between those who have walked similar paths. Later that evening, alone in my study, I opened the leather-bound journal I had begun shortly after returning home. Its pages chronicled not just events but evolving insights, the gradual clarification of principles that had guided my choices, often implicit until circumstances forced their articulation. On a fresh page, I wrote, "A year ago today, I chose freedom over accommodation, authenticity over approval, self-respect over family peace. The cost has been substantial, relationships strained, perhaps permanently altered, moments of doubt and isolation, the ongoing grief of opportunities lost. Yet the alternative would have cost something far more precious: my fundamental dignity, my right to self-determination, my accountability to the woman I have been becoming throughout 8 decades of life. What I know now that I could not have articulated then, that love without respect becomes a subtle form of ownership, that generosity, when expected or demanded, ceases to be a gift and becomes tribute, that family obligation, separated from mutual regard, corrupts both the giver and receiver, that aging does not require the surrender of agency, only the wisdom to adapt how that agency is expressed. Most importantly, that we teach others how to treat us not primarily through words, but through the boundaries we establish and maintain, the expectations we accommodate or refuse, the vision of ourselves we insist upon even when others find it inconvenient. The $3 million that sparked this journey was never about the money itself, but about what it represented, the tangible manifestation of my lifetime of careful stewardship, the concrete expression of values I held sacred, the resource that revealed the true nature of relationships I had perhaps misunderstood for years. In redirecting those funds from inheritance to foundation, I was not punishing my children, but liberating us all from patterns that diminished rather than elevated our humanity. Whether they ever recognize this truth is beyond my control. What matters is that I have aligned my resources with my values, my choices with my deepest understanding of what constitutes a life well lived. I closed the journal, feeling the truth of those words settling into my bones. Outside my window, the garden lay in evening shadow, resting but vital, adapting to changing seasons while maintaining its essential character. Like me. The phone rang, interrupting my reflection. Donnie's name appeared on the screen. "Grandma? Just checking in. I remembered what today is." The simple acknowledgement brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Thank you, sweetheart. I'm doing well." "I figured you might be," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "You're the strongest person I know." Not strong, I thought as we continued our conversation. Just clear. Clear about what matters, what doesn't, what can be compromised, and what must be protected at all costs. The clarity had come at a high price, but it was worth every penny of $3 million. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.